I have to admit, network seems to be playing around a bit this evening, but it could be okay. It should be okay. And today, we are doing Procurement for Peace. Why conflict management and deterrent haven't been factored into procurement since World War II. And this, realistically speaking, is the second draft of this topic because the first draft is already uploaded as a recorded video. And I'm doing this all because, well, Wayne originally had this idea, Alex Special. What does Alex think we haven't covered that we really need to cover because of current events? And some of you might know, but occasionally I get invited back to Gings to give public lectures. Occasionally. And no, I don't bring a poodle with me. The fees and biscuits are too much, by the way. And this year, it seems to be I'm being scheduled for the Remembrance Week talk. And well, normally I do something from the history side of my work. That's the fun part of my work. But I do more than just history. My PhD is war studies, which means I do something in the international relations world. And what I tend to do is I work on what's called conventional deterrence / conflict management, which is a fancy way for how do you try and judge it to prevent wars happening. That's one of the reasons why I enjoy talking about what I was talking about, the World War One, the run up to World War One, and its call, and you know how we end up in war and those sort of scenarios. This is the stuff I do. This is very much the stuff I do. And as such, well, this is what I'm here to talk about today. I'm here to talk about procurement for peace. And for some reason today I'm having the absolute worst upload, worst frame rate I have had on this computer, on this internet, in weeks. AI thumbnail by. Bye-bye, Jamie. I'm not an artist. I chibified a picture of me and my dog. But hey-ho. So, procurement for peace. Why conflict management and deterrence haven't been factored into procurement since World War II? Well, that's often an interesting question. That is often an interesting question. You see, since World War II, we had a rather long period of a bipolar world. We really did. The world was very simple. And it made deterrence, it made conflict management very simple. Basically, the big powers in each faction would try and influence the smaller powers, and that would try and cause peace. Because the very simple methodology and viewpoint was anything that goes wrong, anything that's complicated, leads to could ultimately lead to a general nuclear exchange and wipe out of the planet. Now, the thing is, the world doesn't stay so nice and simple for long, realistically, and it was a rather unnatural period by human relations anyway. Then we've ended up with the unipolar world, which was a short period, about a decade and a half, where frankly America was so ascendant that, you had the era, to quote my good friend Drakenfell, of the sternly worded note. The sternly worded note. that would do the job. That was enough. And if it's enough, that's great. But the thing about the sternly worded note is that rested on the fact that everyone knew powers had such a massive military preponderance of firepower at their disposal that you had to listen to it. That era is now well and truly over. And we're into basically another period of what is more normal for human history, a multipolar world, where you have some who are superpowers, or functionally, as far as we can work out, acting as great powers. There are some medium powers who are function as great powers because they are global powers, but they are lesser great powers. We have some medium powers who are regional powers, who are very dominant in their region around them. And we have other nations which fit in around all that. And this makes things complicated, because now standard assessment has returned to what it was always historically. What capability do you have to get involved in any scenario? And what is your perceived likelihood to get involved in any scenario? Therefore, will we listen to you in any scenario? That's it. A lot of it's about perception. And a lot is about perception of people who really don't understand much necessarily about military affairs. And this can cause an issue. It can cause us to miss certain things, because we can think, well, the world's going to be easy, the world's going to be straightforward, the world's going to run in a certain line. It doesn't necessarily run that way. It doesn't necessarily run that way. So what are we talking about today? Well, we're talking about the difference between procuring a vessel, or usually it's a ship, or an asset. But let's be honest, with fighter aircraft, with most of the stuff you're procuring for the army, they are going to be war-fighting tools. This is a really interesting thing, because honestly, this idea of procuring something which is a platform which for conflict management, as well as for war-fighting, realistically only applies to naval platforms as a duality. When you're into air power, you're procuring a fighter because it's not really got the space to have events and those sort of things. It's got to look a really cool, sexy fighter. There is a high-level argument for procuring an aircraft which is as maneuverable as you possibly can make it, and also you do not mind about it wandering in terms of visibility and radar range of maybe a not-so-friendly power, so it can do an air display every now and again. The Russians are masters of this. Their aircraft really aren't that great in terms of capability when you compare them against their American counterparts. And we all know that. But the trouble is, when you see them doing their hijinks and their various very cool maneuvers at air shows, that tends to make people think otherwise. And that's the reality of it. Imagery matters. When it comes to warships, it really does matter. Really, really does matter. Now, of these assets in front of you, 2 are flexible assets. 2 are not so flexible assets.